out more and take your browser over to supertalktv.com. You'll see I've got some friends in the studio with me today, and we're talking about Ralph Zuke. He is from St. Louis. He's a Rotarian, and he is making his way to Houston to help Rotary International's campaign to eradicate polio. And with us, we also have Rotarian Dr. Nelson. He is from Mississippi. He lives here in central Mississippi. He is the Director of Office of Health Data and Research for the Department of Health, but he's a polio survivor. And so these two stories just go together so well, and what you're trying to accomplish is so cool. So welcome. We'll start there. I'm going to start with you, Ralph. All right, where did this idea come from, which I'm sure is what you get asked all the time. How does someone from St. Louis say, I'm going to get on a bike and make my way to Houston, stop in Mississippi, and raise some awareness?
Well, this isn't my first time doing this. 3 years ago, I did the same ride from St. Louis to Toronto for the International Conference. And at that conference, I had said that if polio wasn't eradicated by the time the Houston conference came around, I was going to do the bike ride to Houston as well.
How often do y'all have your international conference?
Well, it's every year, but it's not always on the North American continent. So this was the first opportunity after Toronto to do that. And more importantly, I hope that we do eradicate polio soon, because the next one is, I believe, in Calgary, and that's 1,800 miles, mostly uphill. I don't want to do that. So
if you are putting out that kind of claim, Ralph, that means that y'all are very close to eradicating, and I say y'all, but the world, but the efforts behind eradicating polio. How close is the world?
Currently this year, there are 2 cases worldwide. So we're very close, but until it's gone, it's still a threat. And you have to be at 0 for 3 years for it to be certified as polio-free. So we still have a little bit to go, but we're so close, and we really want to get it done. And my legs really want to see this get done, too.
Because I know they're definitely tired. Okay, Dr. Nelson, this is a personal story for you, as well as you've dedicated to your life as a Rotarian to raise awareness as a polio survivor. When you hear 2 cases, you think, oh, that's nothing. What are we worried about that for? Let's rewind. I mean, I don't even know how many decades or, I guess, generations ago where polio was a serious issue. So take us back to when polio was scary.
Well, I would say probably because Ralph has been doing this awesome adventure, and I'm so happy to finally meet him in person. I mean, we had this approach by emails and stuff, and so thank you to the district for supporting this endeavor. There was another new case that we had, so we have 3 cases right now.
It's bad news. This is good things.
I mean,
Dr. Nelson?
3 wild polio cases now, 1 in Afghanistan and 2 in Pakistan. This recent case was also in Pakistan. Let me see if I can read the name of the province correctly. It was in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in Pakistan, here in the borderline with Afghanistan.
I'm so glad you tried to pronounce that.
I am so appreciative of your ability to nail that, because I would have skirted it just like I do your last name, Dr. Nelson.
Yes, and I appreciate that, Rebecca. So, yes, polio has been with us since thousands of years.
Okay, so more than generations. Yeah.
Correct, yes. There is actually, in one of the tombs that were discovered from the ancient Egypt, there is an actual painting of a man with polio, with an atrophic leg from polio. So it's been with us for thousands of years. So this virus is not easy to get rid of. Even though right now we are having 3 cases in 2022, this is a very important milestone that we're reaching. Yes, we're very close, but we still need to do more work, because there's the problem of still having wild poliovirus cases, but also we're having some cases that are coming from mutations of the viruses that were in the vaccines. And this is due to some low vaccination rates in certain areas of the world. So it's going to keep us busy for some time, but hopefully I agree with Ralph. that we'll have this eradication of wild polio cases soon.
Soon. And Ralph says, my legs want that as well, because you're on this sort of mission. But raising awareness is part of it, because sometimes when science matches the need that, the world needs and helps eradicate something, we tend to take that for granted. And then we forget all the work or all the scariness that went on, when the virus was with us. And, you don't want to slip backwards. Ralph, you have an interesting story how you made it into just being a Rotarian. Can you share that connection? Because really this is also a Rotarian story, because as an organization, they really led the way of trying to eradicate polio through vaccination distribution.
So I ended up in Rotary because I was dating a woman.
Didn't see that coming.
I hear that a lot, actually. But I was dating a woman, and quite simply, she asked. And at the time, I knew very little about Rotary, and she told me a little bit, but then I went home and I did my research. And what I found out was that Rotary is an amazing organization in that as an individual, I can sort of pick what my passion is. So actually, when I first started Rotary, water was my passion, doing clean water, and which actually ties in a bit with polio as well, because it's a waterborne disease.
Correct.
So I started out the first 3 years. I did an international projects, and then it sort of went into the polio side. And it's just that I have say. I can do, within the framework of 1.2 million Rotarians, I can actually do what I want to do, what makes me really happy. And there's very few organizations that you can go to, and you have that freedom that as long as it fits within their pillars, they're fine with it. And all you have to do is sell it to your club. Once you sell it to your club, then you go with it. And actually, the whole polio story with Rotary, it started in the Philippines. It was I believe a past president who said, I want to eradicate polio in the Philippines. And they did it. They started doing it, and it just snowballed. And finally, Rotary, I think in the early 80s, said, let's make this our goal. And at the time, a lot of people were skeptical it could even be done. There was about 350,000 cases a year. And now look at us now. We're down to a handful. So it's been an amazing ride.
Literally, figuratively,
Yes.
all of the above.
So, and I have done other rides. So I do, one thing about when you do fundraising is that you try to provide some entertainment back. And that's part of what the rickshaw is for. It's also a hook. I mean, if I was just bike riding from St. Louis to Houston, a lot of people can do that. It's really not that difficult. But when you throw a 113-pound rickshaw on it and...
Describe that for us. What is that? What are you pulling behind your back?
Okay,
your back. Well, your back, but your bike.
Okay, probably an easier way is that it looks like a Lazy Boy chair. Now, Barcolounger was sort of the brand before Lazy Boy. And so it kind of looks like it's that mounted on two wheels that's attached to my bike. But we went with Barcolounger because, quite honestly, Lazy Boy Rickshaw doesn't roll off the tongue very well, but Barcolounger Rickshaw does, so we went with that. It just sounded better. It was marketing. And so it was just, You're
a carpenter. Did you create it?
Yeah, I actually built it. I had actually built it because somebody had asked me about doing another fundraiser, and I was going to do a ride across country, and they said, well, that's fine, but a lot of people do that. And she's right. I have 4 family members who have gone cross country.
Strange family.
So, and very ambitious people. And I'm really glad we didn't do that with the rickshaw because the Rockies would have been awful. But anyway, so she said, well, what's your hook? And I said, well, I'm riding cross country. But, she said, no, you got to have something better than that. And admittedly, I was sitting at a bar, and I probably was on my 3rd pint at that point. I just said, well, how about with a Barcolounger Rickshaw? And to be quite honest, I have no idea where it came from. So, and she kind of laughed, and she said, what's that? And I said, give me a couple weeks and I'll figure it out. And so I went back to the shop and we built it.
Well, when you think about, though, international travel and other places, this is a form of transportation for a lot of folks. Is you have bicycles and then you have like the seat on the back. It's like a little taxi.
Right.
It's not always recreational, right? It definitely probably isn't something you would want to do a little dehydrated from a couple of pints. But, I mean, people see it and they recognize maybe what it's for, and it looks like fun, at least for the person who is
in the back, yes.
sort of in the back. But I think you've been having a lot of fun with your trip. We'll get more with Ralph and Dr. Nelson coming up next here on Find Out More. And hope you're over at SuperTalkTV.com. You can meet Ralph Zuke. He is riding his bike from St. Louis, which is where he calls home, to Houston to help Rotary International's campaign to eradicate polio. And we have Rotarian Dr. Nelson with us, who is a polio survivor. And during the break, you were just chatting about the fact that here in America, polio was eradicated in the 1980s, I think it was. And so I was born in 83, so that makes me think, gosh, I've only learned about polio through history books and, awareness campaigns still for the vaccine, or when I had my own children and that was part of, just their well baby, whatever. But for you, Dr. Nelson, it wasn't as, it was a little bit more real than that. So when did you contract polio?
Well, I was 3 years of age. At that time, there was an outbreak in Colombia. Probably the audience already know by my accent, I'm from Columbia, Mississippi, right?
Yes.
Well, actually a little south than that, right?
But we'll claim you.
Yes. And I'm a proud Mississippian now. I can say that. And so there was an outbreak. And unfortunately, at that moment, the vaccine needs to follow a certain protocol for handling and distribution. And a lot of that has to do with the conditions for keeping it cold, the refrigeration. At some point, that batch of vaccines got damaged because the refrigeration was not properly kept. So that batch was damaged. That's the vaccine I got. So unfortunately, I was not receiving the protection from the vaccine. So I end up having polio. And that is what brought me to Rotary. I mean, all my life. I started going to rehab clinics. Rotary International had rehab clinics for polio patients. And my first memories is going to a rehab clinic there back home with that huge wheel of Rotary there. So to me, it was coming like, well, a lady brought you to Rotary to fight polio, right? Yeah. And to me, it was a different kind of story coming to Rotary, but it's also the same powerful motive. It's fight against polio.
So Rotary's part in the polio, eradicating polio, did they help create the vaccine, or once there was a vaccine, did they then take over and sort of help with the distribution? Because, I mean, you're thinking, even today when we think about the distribution for the COVID vaccine, a lot of the framework was already laid through the hard work the Rotarians
Correct.
did for polio in terms of world vaccination.
Correct.
So was the vaccine already there, or did Rotarian, how did that work?
I mean, it was a coincidence because the science on one side was working on the vaccines, right? There were some vaccines that were created and improved. Then Rotary came in, as the biggest challenge for humanity at that moment. Rotary took the baton and say, well, we're going to run against polio. We're going to fight for eradicating this disease. And then Rotary started organizing the distribution and do the fundraising and support the governments all over the world to have the efforts on vaccinations. And then the results start coming. Ralph was saying, among the first countries to start with that was in the Philippines. That's when, let's say, it came to be a challenge for Rotary to eradicate polio. And now, 3 cases this year so far, May 2022, we're close. And we'll get it done. I had the opportunity to make a speech in our Starville Rotary Club this January. And I was saying, well, remember when Kennedy said to the American people in the 60s, I want to have an American in the moon by the end of this decade. And then I said to our fellow Rotarians that day, I said, I would like to see polio eradicated by the end of this decade. I know we can do it. It's that we are Rotarians. We're not quitters. We get the job done. we're going to get the eradication before the end of this decade. I'm pretty sure of that.
And that's where it feels like the baton's been passed to Ralph and others who like to really make a splash with the raising of awareness. You're actually in good company, Ralph. Stephen Goldfart reminds us that Elvis was a spokesperson for polio vaccines in the 50s, which you may not know.
Correct.
Mississippi is his home state. So we can put you in the line with
Yes.
with Elvis for that.
I'm not shaking it, though.
You're just peddling it, right?
One thing also to keep in mind is that we look and we say, okay, there's 3 cases. Why do we need to keep raising money? And it's very important to understand that the giving of the vaccines is a portion of what's going on. There's also monitoring. So any country that has potentially bad sanitation, they have to keep monitoring in those because it is a waterborne illness. And that takes people there's water sampling. If there's a suspected outbreak, there's stool samples that have to be done. There has to be research that places that goes to be checked and see if this is actually what's going on. And that's very expensive. And so, and realizing that has to go on beyond reaching zero for a number of years so that we can safely say, yes, this is totally gone. And it's a very expensive job to do. So that's part of why, even though we're really low on the numbers of cases, it's important that we still keep putting the funds to it so we know without a doubt it's gone.
And finishing the job, right? And Dr. Nelson, you were sharing that the one job has been finished. There's only one other disease that's been declared eradicated worldwide. What is that?
Correct. It's smallpox.
So it can be done.
Yes, it can be done. I mean, we still have virus in vials contained in safe, what is this?
Refrigeration?
These huge vaults for security reasons. I mean, the reason why we're keeping some samples of the virus is because we never know with viruses if they can come up again.
You need to get back to the source to be able to create. Yeah.
So science has been, very successful in that part. And the fact that polio is about to be the second, that tells you how difficult this is. And as Ralph was saying, I mean, is the surveillance part. I mean, the reason why we know at this point that in May 2022 that we have 3 cases. I mean, he came to the studio still with the information that there were 2 cases, and then I'm telling him, no, we have 3.
I reminded you this was a good thing, so you can't up that number.
But that's this is the nature of science, that we keep those numbers in on the top of our minds, because that's what keeps us going. Is kind of the challenge. Is that okay? Yes, we had a 3rd case last year. We had less than that, but still we keep going.
We keep going, and that way people like me and then my children, that's one less thing we have to worry about with our kids is
Correct.
polio, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. And thanks to just the continued awareness like that you're doing, Ralph, do you find when you do your media stops or you meet with people along the way, I think you're right at 500.8 miles,
There
I think
you
is
go.
what I heard
There you
earlier, and you're over the hump of
Over the hump.
of getting to your goal, that some folks like hadn't thought about polio in years, like you're bringing it back up or introducing it to them for the first time?
Unless you're a Rotarian, almost nobody knows that polio is still there. And
I feel like it's on the list of the vaccines that your kids get, and then your pediatrician sort of tells you, or you have the images of the iron lung in your head from TV or the movies.
Well, I mean, a good example, when you said when you were born, I'm like, wow, you've never even had to, in the U.S., you've never had to worry about it. And that's understandable. If it's not, something that you're going to see a lot, you wouldn't think about it. So that's part of my thing is I engage with everyone who looks at me.
Which is probably a lot of people when you're riding around
and again,
in a bicycle with the seat on the back.
That's the whole part of the rickshaw is that the rickshaw doesn't have any real significance other than it's a tool to engage people. And to be quite honest, it's also when I get to engage people, that's when I'm like having my most fun. 7 o'clock in the morning when you're getting ready to ride 40 miles in this heat, that's not always the best part of my morning. But as soon as I get in and I get to start talking to people, anytime I stop for a water break, somebody's going to walk over and be like, what is this? And we'll take the cover off. And I said, I get them into the rickshaw. And for about a minute, because once you're in and I'm moving, you can't get out. and not that anyone's ever wanted to. No one's ever wanted to. It's very comfortable. But that allows me a minute to give them a quick talk about Rotary and polio and the roles that Rotary has had in the eradication of polio.
I think it'd be interesting if you're listening to Good Things Today and maybe you have been born the 80s or after to ask your parents or grandparents about polio. You heard it today and just, and they'd probably be like, wow, I hadn't thought about that in years. But more than likely, if they were born, in the 40s or 50s or earlier, they are definitely aware of it, at least from a worldwide perspective. Well, your journey's not over. And neither is ours with you, Ralph. So we've got a few more things with you coming up next here on .org. And everything you need to know about polio can be found from our guests over at SuperTalkTV.com. We're still talking with Ralph Zuke. He is from St. Louis. He's making his way to Houston. He stopped here in Mississippi on bike for his awareness campaign to eradicate polio. We got a text. Jeff in Oxford said, I remember the polio vaccine when I was a child. It was administered on a sugar cube. It was the tastiest vaccination ever. And so I don't remember my kids getting a sugar cube.
That helped a lot. And also Elvis helped a lot. I mean, I'm a teenager, especially at that time.
Yeah.
His promotion of polio vaccinations.
And then still things like this help a lot, Ralph. I want to talk about your journey. When did you kick off from St. Louis?
I left on May 3rd from St. Louis and immediately crossed the river into Illinois and worked my way down partway through Illinois, back across at Cape Girardeau and down to Memphis and then to here. And then we're going to be onward to Baton Rouge and then to Houston.
And then to Houston. How many total miles?
We're shooting for right around 1,000. My goal is actually 1,000. If I can get it, I'm going to. If I even get close, I'm going to spend an extra few hours to get there. We're going to get there.
1,000 hours on the bike.
1,000 miles.
I mean, it's maybe 1,000 hours. I know. I don't think you bike.
I'm not that slow.
It may feel like a mile an hour, but you're probably going a little faster. I got tickled with you, Ralph. You said that Mississippi's a little hillier than you thought. You thought we were just all the flat plains of the Delta.
I was told I actually chose my route a little wrong. I should have gone a little bit more west, but
where did you come into Mississippi?
Let's see. I'm trying to think where it was. Straight down from Memphis.
Hernando.
That sounds about
South
right.
Haven kind of sort of area.
I think so. And I was very surprised. We had scouted this out in January, but it's hard to do it from a vehicle. And if you find one area is not ideal, you have to backtrack. And we just didn't have the time to do it all the way. And so we're making some adjustments now, and it's all going to work out.
Is there a team with you?
I have one SAG driver with me at all times. My last SAG driver, Mick, just flew out this morning to go back to St. Louis, and I have Kevin coming in this evening, and he's going to take me all the way to Houston. So, and he did part of the Toronto ride as well.
With all of that bike riding, though, that you've earned a lot of good meals. Have you eaten well on your trip?
I'm sincerely hoping that I lose a little weight on this trip, because Toronto I lost 5 pounds. 703 miles, I only lost 5 pounds. So Rotarians feed me very well.
Well, that's another thing to a part of your trip is you are stopping at clubs along the route. Mm-hmm. How many have you stopped to here in Mississippi?
Oh, I think in Mississippi we probably have 7 or 8 so far, and I know we have a few more to go. It's hard. We would love to give more, but Rotary clubs usually meet at a certain time 1 day a week. So if we're too far away, sometimes it is for breakfast, and every once in a while there's an evening meeting. But it's hard to we try to engage as much as we can, but it's always fun when we do, and they always feed us. And I will say, most Rotary clubs have really good food. Mm-hmm. There's been a couple that was like, okay. So we'll head on over to someplace else later and have a bite.
Well, you're in Mississippi, so this would not be the state to diet. I was just going to say that. You better stop off and at least have some delicious food along your route.
Was it banana pie?
Banana pie or banana pudding?
Pudding. Oh, my God.
Banana pie. I will never look at it the same way again.
Banana pudding is an awesome thing. And we don't get very much of that up in St. Louis. So it's like, every time I see it, I'm like, yeah, we'll take at least one bowl of that.
Everybody's mouth just started to water, Ralph. Everybody went straight to their grandmother or their aunt that makes the best banana pudding. It's a whole thing here. It's considered religion. And usually this time of year is when it starts to break out.
Okay, so if you see a red rickshaw riding down the road and you have an extra slice, I'm always up for it, and we'll figure out who has the best one.
Derek in Greenwood asked, are you pulling a red trailer behind your bike? Or
Yes.
He passed you on Highway 49 in Tallulah. Did I say that? Chula. I always get it wrong. And then tell Ralph he is traveling down Highway 51. He would like to stop in Boca Chita at the Boca Chita Boys Restaurant. They will gladly treat you to lunch or dinner. They're just south of Brookhaven. So you see, Mississippians are gonna feed you.
Oh, I love that. I love that. My doctor may disagree, but I love that.
We'll try to have you get to Houston on good shape.
So you had to, I mean, at least the hospitality. We're the best state, right?
Yeah, y'all have done very well. Very well. So it's been so much fun. And Mississippi is probably the biggest state that I'm riding through as far as miles. Again, if y'all could flatten out those hills a little more, it'd be a lot better. But it's a beautiful state. And honestly,
too bad you didn't come from the Delta. Well, if you did, and then you got here, you would really be angry because it would have been kind of
uphill.
Yeah.
No, but I got to tell you, I've driven through Mississippi a couple times. This is the most time I've spent it, and it really is a stunningly beautiful state. And I've been pleasantly surprised at how much I'm enjoying riding here.
I hope some of your ride will be on the Natchez Trace.
Yes, did that yesterday. Next 2 days will be, and that was heaven.
Too bad too you weren't doing that during the fall, and you could see the beautiful leaf, and the weather would have been a little bit nicer. Well, I don't know. It's now Mississippi's weather. You could have ended up in an ice storm in the fall, but traditionally it would have been a little bit cooler for you than maybe right now.
I am going to make it back here to ride the entire parkway, because this is a beautiful parkway to ride on.
He said that right here on Good Things, y'all. We will hold that.
I will
that
come
to
back.
you. But all this again is for that reason. There's 3 cases of polio left in the world, which is mind-boggling when you think about that. And it still takes a lot of effort to eradicate that. When you think about only 3 cases left, Dr. Nelson, what does it take? Is it still vaccinations, or where is the gaps that those 3 individuals found themselves with polio?
I mean, yes, part of it is vaccinations, and as I was saying, some of the virus that are out there because of the vaccines, they mutated. So we'll still need to control those. I mean, kind of improve the vaccinations in those areas, and of course is getting to the people. And if you see the countries that we're talking about, Afghanistan and Pakistan, then you understand that besides the geographical difficulties that they have, this is the biggest mountain range in the earth, the Himalayas, right? So they share these huge mountains. And on top of that, you have these deep valleys and very difficult places to get to. And on top of that, the circumstances of the environment, the cultures, some people that might be hesitant to have the vaccinations for religious reasons, some others that might be hesitant for political reasons. And remember what happened with Osama bin Laden, that unfortunately the plot to get to him was to, pretend that the crew that was doing the intelligence work were, polio vaccination people. So that adds an additional layer of difficulty to the effort. But still, if people stick with us as Rotarians, we'll get it done.
You'll definitely get it done.
Yes.
I am now seeing you, Dr. Nelson, backpacking in the Himalayas, like going tent to tent, which I think is pretty much kind of what has to happen for it to get done.
But let me tell you, Rebecca, if I have to do it, I'll do it. I put a backpack on me, and as hard as it can be physically as a challenge, I wouldn't mind doing it.
But I think it's important to remember, too, if you're just tuning in with us, that Dr. Nelson is a survivor of polio. So you know, personally speaking, that this is nothing that you want back in America. You want back gaining legs and growing from that 3 to then 4 to, and that's how
For
viruses
anybody in the world, I wouldn't ask this for anyone in the world.
And so when you still have those stories of survivors, which you were even talking about in India, there's going to be a generation of individuals who are still stricken with it, even though it's been eradicated 5 or 6 years ago. It's the aftermath. They know that you don't want this, in your town. And so I think it's those stories, along with folks like you, Ralph, who are out there raising the fun and having the fun and raising the awareness, that reminds us, like, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and I was saying of the record to Ralph, thank you for doing this. I mean, as a polio survivor, I really appreciate what he's doing, because this is really it takes a whole planet to get rid of this disease. So and he is, what he's doing is awesome.
Well, and we are glad you're doing it and not us doing it. And Andy and Jackson said, stay away from Vicksburg Military Park unless you want an extreme workout. I don't know if that is in your route.
As a cyclist, when you're not with a rickshaw, hills are not bad.
Liar.
I wouldn't be crazy about mountains, but hills usually aren't bad. With the 113-pound rickshaw, it becomes a whole nother beast. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward. I've been told, and I'm hoping no one's lying to me about this, that the ride from Baton Rouge to Houston's flat. And I'm really hoping so.
You'll get a little bit of a break. We've got a short one. We'll be back. If you've got a question for Ralph, 601-879-4395. We'll round out good things with the guy. We're finding out more about the adventure that Ralph Zuke has been on for, I guess, for a couple of weeks, since May 3rd?
Let's see. I think I'm on day
2?
19.
Does it all start to sort of blur together?
Yeah, it does. It really does.
So he's riding his bike from St. Louis to Houston.
Don't ask me what day of the week it is, because I actually just don't know.
Hoping to get to that 1,000 miles to eradicate, to help raise awareness and raise funds to eradicate polio. I love this, and we still are talking to Dr. Nelson, who is a survivor of the disease. And I think, though, but still, there can be a lot of joy around an awareness campaign, and you've kind of added that with your journey. Have you had fun?
Yeah, I've been, like I said, first thing in the morning, maybe not so much, but once I get to start to engage with people, that's when the fun starts. And I had a Rotarian a few years back who had passed away last year from COVID. His name is Greg Yank. And Greg was a very key person in my Rotary life, who taught me that if you're not having fun in Rotary, you're not doing it right. And I try to live that way with keeping him in mind with that. I even have his name on my shirts. So
awesome.
Oh, that's an awesome tribute to him. The other good thing in this story that I feel like shouldn't be missed is the fact that this literally took an army of organized people with a focused agenda to get something done. And how incredible are humans? And it happened to be that it was Rotarians, and I think that's awesome. But there's nothing special about Rotarians in the fact that they were just organized people who found a cause that they cared about and utilized their time, talent, and talents to go after one target. And look what can happen. Because you were sharing the story that's the World Health Organization in the beginning, I think it was you, Dr. Nelson, who said that y'all are crazy, with all due respect, to think that you could take on this type of mission. How long has Rotarians been on the mission to eradicate polio?
Well, this is starting it started here in the U.S., right? Right after the vaccine was available. That Rotarians started picking up polio as the natural cause to support. So that was in the 60s.
So we're talking about 60 years?
More than 50 years. More than 50 years of Rotary being involved in the fight of polio. And
in such an instant gratification world, sometimes you have to pause to realize that to make real change, like real tangible change, although there were plenty of countries and communities and families who were forever changed and grateful within that, as sort of a flood, sort of going. But it's taken almost 60 years, and not quite yet, for the entire mission to be done. You can't stop. You just have to keep going.
You celebrate your victories one victory at a time. When I first started Rotary, there were 4 countries that had wild occurring polio. And I remember when India became polio free, which was a huge big deal. I mean, that was one of the largest populations with polio.
Correct.
And you celebrate those victories. If you don't celebrate those along the way, you really do get frustrated. So now we're getting ready to celebrate the biggest one.
Yeah.
And that's if you don't break it down. So even like the ride, I take my ride one day at a time, and maybe towards the end you start to see that finish line, and that's great. And we're getting close to that finish line with polio. So we're getting ready to start celebrating a little bit.
Yeah.
Joe in Meridian wants to know, Ralph, what style bike and saddle do you use?
I use a Gunner bike. They're out of Wisconsin. It's a steel frame, but it's actually very lightweight, and it's got a bit of flexibility to it, so it's a comfortable ride. I actually don't know what saddle I'm using right now.
I hope it's soft.
It's actually
make
it's
nice
hard.
saddles?
No, what you find if you start riding consistently all the time,
your butt just gets used to it?
Oh, it just gets numb. You don't even know it. Yeah, you don't even notice it. I've had absolutely no discomfort riding this at all.
He wanted to add that 5 psi to your tires will roll much better.
It does. And luckily, the rickshaw, because there's usually no weight in it other than the rickshaw itself, I can leave those about right. I'm 265 pounds. At least I was when I started. So I'm a big guy. And so I try not to do the 5 extra PSI because the chance of me popping that tire if I hit something just increases. But so far, luckily for me, I haven't had a flat tire yet.
I'll have to say you should check SuperTalk's social media site after this, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. He's going to get me and Dr. Nelson out there and ride us around. And so it should be a lot of fun to see what it's like to be behind the man on the mission. I don't hope that you have to do it again because that will mean that polio has not been eradicated. But I do hope you make your way back to Mississippi because I think what you're doing is pretty cool.
I definitely will.
The next time they have the international meeting, though, you probably would rather take it by car, by train, by plane, rather than bike.
Just about any other way would be nice.
If they want to follow what you're doing, where can they go?
On Facebook, we have 2 pages. You can follow the St. Louis Civilians, which is my Rotary Club in St. Louis, or you can follow me on Ralph's Rickshaw, which is really easy because I am the only Ralph's Rickshaw on social media.
On the whole Facebook.
And we'll make sure that we link to that as well.
Yes.
This has been a wonderful conversation. I will keep following this story. I think it's great. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All righty, you stick with us. We got more.